This is Stand Up for the Truth, addressing important issues and topics affecting Christians across the nation.
April 22nd, it's a fresh new podcast today. Hopefully we won't have any technical issues. I was a little concerned earlier. And thank you for listening online at q90fm.com/listen. Mary Danielson is back.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. And it's Earth Day. Since 1970, Governor Gaylord Nelson decided this should be Earth Day. I feel like I should be so heavenly minded I'm no earthly good, so that's kind of where I'm going with that. Gary Kah is my guest today. I've known him since the early 90s, and I've always respected and appreciated his watchman heart, not just warning, but also has a heart of dependence on the Lord, patience in watching God work in world events, and also his missions heart for the lost and his heart for Israel. So appreciate Gary so much. I have two scriptures today that go with the podcast, and then we're going to pray. My first one is James 5:16-18. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain. And it did not rain on the land for 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth produced its fruit. Also Philippians 4:6-7, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Speaking of prayer, let's pray together this morning. Oh, Lord, you have shown us the way of life, that justice and mercy and humility are to be the pattern in our sojourn while we're on this earth. We need you every hour to love the things that you love, and we thank you that we can even begin to understand these things from your perspective and live them out towards everyone that we meet. Above all, Lord, help us to love as you love from the foot of the cross. We lift up Gary to you and his family. Thank you for the gifts that you have given him, for his energy and his faithfulness over many years to proclaim the truth, and to remind us that time really is short and that we need to be about your business. Lord, bless and protect him and his loved ones. In Jesus' name, amen. We welcome back Gary Kah of Hope for the World Ministry. Gary is an author and sought-after speaker who brings great insight to events of the day. And I have to say, when I first met Gary, he was really the only one writing on the coming globalist society through his book, En Route to Global Occupation, 1992. And he has a message that is crucial to the political, economic, and spiritual future of this country. In 1997, Gary sensed that God was leading him to write a book exposing the spiritual aspect of the One World movement by examining the plans of the 20th century's top New Agers and how certain unbiblical Eastern teachings are influencing Christianity today and can be found in The New World Religion, 1999. The ministry is Hope for the World, GaryKah.org. It's great to have you back on Stand Up, Gary.
Hi, Mary. It's always good to be with you.
What is new at Hope for the World? You were in Australia. You have a very busy schedule. How did that go?
Yeah, actually, we were in New Zealand for a week, and I spoke 7 times in 7 days in 7 different locations.
Wow.
So we really crisscrossed that country. Everything went very well. The interest level was, it was through the roof. And we were surprised how informed the New Zealander Christians were of what's going on in the United States. I mean, they know more about what's happening here than most Americans. It really shocked me because they feel that if the U.S. goes down, it's going to affect them. And so they're really looking to us for leadership. And so a lot of interesting conversations, met some wonderful people there. By the way, it's an incredibly beautiful country. It's kind of like Yellowstone, the Swiss Alps, and Costa Rica all combined into one.
Wow.
I mean, they've got everything there. So if it's on your bucket list, it's well worth going. But Ray Comfort, of course, came from New Zealand, and he's had quite an impact in the U.S. With the street ministry and a lot of Christian roots there, actually, including their national hymn or their national anthem. It really sounds like a Christian hymn. So I could go on and on. But anyway, then we went over to Australia, and I did a conference there, one-day conference, spoke a couple of times, did a Q&A, and then we had one day and then flew back, and we're still recovering from the 14-hour difference. So I've been waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning,
Sure.
but we're gradually getting back to normal.
Yeah.
But praise the Lord for, really a once in a lifetime opportunity. We didn't see this coming a year ago, but the interest was there, and some people wanted to organize something. So we prayed about it and said, okay, let's do it.
Great. Great. It's good to know that they are informed there and they're watching and waiting. That's good. And with global news and the internet, people can access any story they want pretty much. So praise the Lord. I'm glad it went well. Gary, you've been warning us about globalism before anybody else. And while the wheels seem to grind rather slowly in our lifetimes, here we are. I recall reading your book in 92 and then having heard George Bush Sr. mention the New World Order around that time frame. I was shocked by that. And I thought, what in the world is he talking about? And he and Gorbachev used to use the term to define a sort of a post-Cold War era and basically saying, well, there's just a coming change in international relations. But it really is about global government, Gary. He said that the Gulf War was the first test of the New World Order. I'm sure you remember that. What was that kind of part of what led you? You saw the writing on the wall with this. Did that what led you to write En Route to Global Occupation? Was that included in that?
Well, that was kind of the pinnacle when he began talking about the New World Order, because my book had already been written and it was getting ready to come out right around that time. So the timing was actually really ordained by the Lord, because right when people were beginning to ask questions about the New World Order, that's when my book came out. But really, my experience goes back to the early 80s. When I was in my government job in Indiana, I dealt a lot with our foreign embassies. They're actually the ones that set up my meetings when I traveled overseas on behalf of our state government. So I was on the payroll of the state government. My meetings were set up by our U.S. embassies, which of course are under the State Department. And I learned pretty quick that just a tiny, tiny percentage of our State Department workers are Bible-believing Christians. And so I began asking a lot of just questions, not coming from an antagonistic viewpoint, because if you do, people will just shut up, and so I just kind of played along with some things and learned a lot. And one of the things that I discovered was that many of the people in our State Department, way back then in the 80s, I would say would have been more loyal to an empowered United Nations than to defending our U.S. sovereignty. And coming from my background, of course, my parents both survived World War II in Europe. I was born here in the States after they came over, but they went through a lot. And so I was kind of maybe more sensitized than most people would be to things that should be concerning to us politically. And so I early on remember thinking something's not right here. And then what concerned me the most was that a lot of those people that I was meeting were not very fond of Bible-believing Christians or Jews, nor of Israel. And you had to get to know them a little bit better before they'd be willing to share along those lines. And I do want to be quick to say I did meet a few Christians. It's not that they're all pagans in our State Department, but there was an overriding globalist worldview, and it did not favor Bible-believing Christians and Jews. So that's what started me on this journey. Then I began doing some research, and then on top of that, I was actually invited to join two organizations about a year apart that were involved in this effort to actually bring about a global government, a global system of government. One of these organizations was within our federal government, and I ended up being a volunteer in that organization for 7 years. The last 3 years, I had secret clearance. And I have to tell you, even though I didn't write about that in my book, it was my experience with that organization that helped me connect a lot of the dots, that helped me to write my book eventually. The other organization that I was invited to join was called the World Constitution and Parliament Association. And back in the mid-'80s, there were over 200 leaders of different organizations who belonged to that organization, all of them promoting global government beneath the surface. This was all beneath the surface still at that time. They found out about you. You didn't find out about them. This was before the internet or anything like that.
Right.
And so I was invited to join. And so for 4 years, I corresponded with that organization and collected hundreds of pages of documents including a copy of a world constitution that they had already drafted that was still being tweaked. Just a few names I'll throw out there. One of the vice presidents was Ramsey Clark, who was our U.S. Attorney General back under Jimmy Carter. So this guy was over our FBI, had taken an oath to uphold our U.S. Constitution, all that, and yet he was involved in an organization as a vice president that was drafting a world constitution for a world government. One of the other names listed on one of the letterheads was Dr. Inamullah Khan, who was the president of the World Muslim Congress, arguably the most influential Muslim in the world at that time in Pakistan, from Pakistan. And then you had Eagle Arvik. He was the chairman of the Nobel Prize Committee. He was one of the sponsors of the organization. So there were quite a few Nobel Prize recipients that were part of this organization. So you might say, how in the world did you get in? I mean, why did they invite you in? And I think I was young at the time and in state government, and a lot of people at that time thought I had a political future. And I believe they thought if they could kind of grab me and influence me and shape me, that I could be one of their, spokespeople. That's all I can figure. But I was the youngest person that I ever knew in that organization. I believe the Lord opened up that door just so I could get an inside look at where all this was going. And just to wrap this part up real quick, their goal, as I saw it, was to ultimately create the impression that this endeavor to create a world government was really nothing more than a grassroots democratic, we the people effort. So to make it look non-threatening, as if it's coming from the bottom up.
Right.
And of course, they're working from the top down as well, globalist forces. So it's a bottom up, top down approach of eventually trying to force all of us into this global regime, which, like I said, is not very fond of Christians or Jews. And a number of the people that I knew of in that organization were heavily involved in the occult. And so anyway, so that's what got me going and eventually led to my book. And I thought I was done. Lord, I've done what you called me to do. I put this stuff into a book. I had no idea that was just the beginning. And so here we are 33 years later. And I'm still writing and speaking on this, by the grace of God.
Wow. And I love your observation there, the bottom up, top down. I think that's what the world government, they want us to think that this was our idea, or that the mark of the beast was, we agreed to that or something like that. I think there's an element of that. I don't have that down cold yet, but there's something to that. And now you talk about finding out about them finding out. Now we're finding out about them because of the internet, because when you go, you're interested in Davos, in January, you can go to the website, you can find out who's speaking, what they're speaking on. Right now, the IMF and the World Bank are having a confab, and you can follow these things. It's so fascinating to me. And Klaus Schwab retired yesterday from the WEF. Any thoughts on a successor there? Is it just going to be Harari? Is he going to be the next guy? Because Schwab, he was out there. He was the face of the WEF. I'm curious if you have any ideas on who it might be that is taking his place.
Schwab was getting old, and we had some hints late last summer that he might be resigning soon and handing over the reins to somebody younger. Okay. And it's interesting, he chose the day after the Pope died to do so because I don't know. The Pope was very close to the World Economic Forum. Yeah. That's a whole other matter. In fact, he sent regular representatives to convene with, some of the top leaders in the WEF. And a lot of the globalists really felt that this Pope was their guy to help them put the final pieces into place. And they were pushing hard to get this done while he was in. But he passed on. And so I don't know if Schwab had months ago picked this date or if it was just a coincidence. I don't know, but it's just very interesting that so much has happened so quickly. But there are a lot of younger people, very dedicated globalists who he has worked with closely for years now. And so any one of a number of them could step in. But Harari, he's one of them. He's one possibility. Temporarily, a guy by the name of Peter, and his last name slips me right now, but he's temporarily in the interim time going to take charge, but we'll see what happens with that. I'm sure it'll be someone very dedicated to their cause because there's a lot of funding going into it, a lot of commitment.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
often say many of these people are more committed to their globalist agenda than many Christians I know are committed to the Lord Jesus Christ and taking a stand for him. And that's a shame, but it's true. These people a lot of them are absolutely sold out to their cause.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of money to put a world government in place. Very, very interesting. So we're looking at a new pope soon down the road, a new head of the WEF. This pope was from Latin America, very Marxist, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, LGBTQ, the whole thing. I'm very interested in how that's going to play out in light of that. So let's move on. I want to talk about your latest article, Don't Stop Praying. It's a very refreshing emphasis on seeking God's face, his will, his perspective on world events. Under the progressives, ever since Obama, and probably before that, the moral decay of our society has reached new highs or new lows, depending on how you want to look at it. I think seeing the days of Lot unfold the way they have before us, it drove a lot of believers to their knees, especially in light of the election. But we are seeing layers and layers of corruption getting peeled back with Trump taking on the swamp 2.0. Talk to us about your insights as Americans, I think, did get on their knees about the State of the Union in 2024 and 2025 here. They also saw value in local government. I think there was a bit of a wake-up call recently because I think Christians going out and voting and hitting the primaries, I think we did see some wake-up there, Gary. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, in our circles, I can't ever remember during my lifetime seeing so many people taking prayer seriously and realizing that our country needed God's intervention desperately, and that we had our backs to the walls, and things were moving forward very quickly toward a type of global system of government. Again, that's not very friendly, obviously, from everything we've seen, not very friendly toward Christians and Jews. So I was actually asked, and it was a real honor, very humbling. I was asked to participate in the 40 Days of Prayer initiative, and they asked me to pray on day 24. And this was a national effort that many people were participating in. And I was asked to specifically pray into the corruption in our government. And so one of the things I prayed for, just some of the words in my prayer, I said, we ask you, Lord God, to expose and bring to light the corruption and the deception of the socialist anti-Christian agenda being perpetrated by so many of our government leaders. Root out this evil and wickedness, Lord, that the truth would prevail. Cause confusion among our adversaries so that they might not be able to advance their malicious intentions. And, many people praying for this, praying together on this, and look what's happening right now. More has come out, more has been exposed in the last 3 months about the corruption and high levels and what's been going on for the last number of years. So I have to believe that it is an answer to prayer. I believe God hears our fervent prayers go up, especially when many are praying in unison and it's genuine. And so thank the Lord that much of this is coming out. So people who just a year or two ago weren't concerned about any of this and even were kind of on the other side, pushing or at least helping the other agenda along by not really taking a stand and thinking, oh, things will be all right. All of a sudden, they got very concerned and realizing how our money has been spent, some of the programs it's gone into, the slush funds. This is our taxpayer money that we're helping to support ridiculous things, immoral things, blatantly immoral things around the world, where the U.S. has basically been forcing immorality on the rest of the world, which should break all of our hearts, And so to see all this being exposed now and a legitimate effort being made to turn things around, it is refreshing. And so we need to pray really for President Trump and his cabinet members who are involved in exposing this, that he would continue to give them boldness, but also that their efforts would bear fruit. That it would just be talk, but that they'd be able to actually get things done and turn things around. And the courts are going to fight this. They already are. They're litigating everything that the administration tries to do to shut down certain government agencies that are corrupt. And it seems as if everything that the far left accuses the current administration of doing, they've been doing themselves.
That's right.
It's quite amazing to see this unfold. So politically speaking, we really are in a battle. I mean, it's all out. And the courts are kind of the final firewall for the far left, because I'd say 70-80% of the judges have leftist leanings. And so they're ruling more times than not in favor of the left on some of these things. And imagine, Mary, if we had to, in order to get the bad guys out of the country that are in here, that have come in over the last 4 years, if every one of those had to be litigated, it would take the next 50 years to get them all out. There's no way that can be done. So they can just walk in on their own, but to get them out, it would go through all these court proceedings. And then think of all the money that the attorneys are getting who are defending them, and we're paying for all this. It's undoable. It's undoable.
Oh, it really is. And these lower courts seem to think they have a power above the president, the person that the people voted for. And a lot of these justices are just appointed by Biden and Obama, et cetera, et cetera. And it just disturbs me no end that they feel that they have the power to actually take away the power that the people gave the president. There's something horribly wrong about that, Gary.
Yeah. And we need to pray that the judges would make swift rulings and that they would be in favor of defending our national sovereignty, that it would work against criminals and defend law-abiding citizens. And right now what I'm seeing is there are a lot of judges doing just the opposite. So we need to pray that if there's anything in their backgrounds, any major compromises, things that they've done wrong, that this would come to the surface and that God would take down those judges. I believe it's literally going to take a supernatural act of God, because they're so entrenched, and a lot of these judges are in for a lifetime.
Right.
And many of them also belong to the secret societies and are high-level Freemasons, which is a whole other story. But I'll just say this to give you one example, Mary. Back in the 1960s, the Warren Commission, of the 9 Supreme Court justices, 8 of them were Freemasons. And Earl Warren of the Warren Commission was the highest level Freemason in the state of California at the time. And the commission was, of course, named after him. Right. They had a complete lock on our judicial system. And so not to say that all Freemasons are Satanists or anything like that. I realize there are a lot of people involved that don't realize perhaps what that order is about in the higher levels. But even if it was a good order, to have 8 of 9 Supreme Court justices belonging to the same organization should throw up flags. And at the local level, all around our country, this has been the case for decades, where you have people belonging to various secret societies where they take an oath unto death to uphold whatever their superiors dictate. And then to be able to hold office, there's something wrong about that, because they've given their loyalty to a different cause other than our Constitution, truth be told. So again, let's be praying that God would root out the judges who are compromised and who have other loyalties other than to our U.S. Constitution. And hopefully we can get some genuine Christian believers, more of them. And I do thank the Lord for the judges we do have who are upright and moral people, but they're in a minority still, and that needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the greatest exhortations in the Scripture is to pray without ceasing. And if Christians take that seriously, the prayer list is very, very long at this point in life, but that is important, and there's a reason Paul says that. The economy, Gary, Trump has taken on the economy. There's unsustainable debt. It's going to balloon to, $1.2 trillion in 2025. Now, whatever trickery or sorcery anybody can come up with to reduce that debt in any meaningful measure, what's that going to take, Gary? Because you mentioned the timing with this, the potential repercussions if exporting nations refuse to reduce or eliminate their tariffs on U.S. goods. Talk about a war. Trump is neck deep in that war right now. So talk to us about this unsustainable debt. What's next here? And is Trump going to be successful with this? Because it's intense.
Yeah, he has an uphill battle.
Yes.
I believe he is trying to do the right thing because right after World War II, we were the wealthy country of the world, and to help the European nations bounce back, it was understandable how there'd be certain kind of tariffs that work against the U.S. to help them. But now I've got cousins in Germany that have a higher standard of living than we do here in the States.
Wow.
And things are still swung in their favor. So there needs to be some balance brought in. And I believe the president is trying to do that. The only thing I would say is if it was me, I would have waited a little bit longer on the tariffs until oil prices can be brought down. In his first term, we were down to $2.20 a gallon for an extended period of time. It even went lower than that for a while. And when that's the case, it saves the average family a few $1,000s a year in energy costs. And if we were at that same point, which it could take us a couple of years to get back to that point, but I believe we can do it because we do have plenty of oil and resources right here in the United States, and we can even export, which would help offset debt as well. If we could get to that point, that would roughly offset any rise in costs of goods because of what could be somewhat of a tariff war. If there's an all-out tariff war, prices will go up. It will be inflationary. And my question is right now, is our economy strong enough to endure that? The stock market is so shaky. It's way overvalued already as it is. Right. It's due for a correction. So if people get skittish because of tariffs, because China and 10 or 20 other countries say we're not budging, then all of this could implode theoretically. And the globalists would love nothing more because they want to bring in a new global economic system anyway. And so the old system has to fail first, or at least appear to be failing, for them to make their argument for a new system. So this is where President Trump has to be really, really careful, and timing is everything. So I hope that oil prices come down quickly enough in our country to offset any increases perhaps in other goods that are being imported. And in some cases, we don't have a choice. I mean, we're importing medicines from China that are critical. Antibiotics, as of 2 years ago, 80 to 90% of all of our antibiotics were being imported from China, which that's ridiculous and never should have gotten to that point, but it is. So on certain products, we don't have a choice. We have to import it from China. And so if they start charging 2 or 3 times as much, we are going to feel that. So again, pray specifically that energy prices would come down, that your independent drillers in places like North Dakota would be able to start pumping the oil again, and that it would have an effect on prices, and that also the brewing tariff war wouldn't be as bad as what it looks that it could be, that countries would, in due diligence, begin to negotiate with the Trump administration and say, okay, we're willing to reciprocate. If we put a 10% tariff on certain products, we'll allow you to do the same to our products, or better yet, let's just eliminate all the tariffs and level the playing field. And that is a possibility, but it's going to be difficult, and it's going to take some really wise, discerning negotiating, but it's not outside the realm of possibility with God's help.
Wow. More things to add to our prayer list. Talking to Gary Kah today, GaryKah.org. And we're talking about all the things that are going on in this world that really need that backbone of prayer from the church. Trump on January 21st declared national energy emergency in this country. So we were just talking about increasing domestic oil and gas production to help level out some of these things. So way more to talk about with Gary when we come back. I want to talk about NAFTA. I know he'll remember that. We're going to talk about that. We'll be back in 2 minutes with more from Gary Kah. Stay with me.
Thank you so much for sharing today's Stand Up for the Truth video podcast. We invite you to check out our other headline news site, ctrnn.org. That's ctrnn.org.
Feedback, questions, and topic suggestions are always appreciated. Email us at comments@standupforthetruth.com.
Welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth for this Tuesday, April the 22nd. Talking to Gary Kah today about so many things, especially our last topic was increasing domestic oil and gas production to help sort of level out this tariff situation. And the globalists also, I think, are concerned that Trump will keep the West hooked on planet-destroying fossil fuels. And so you got the environmental aspect of this. But Gary, you gave me a statistic when we were off the mic here about oil and gas and how much is actually in this country. Talk to us about sustaining the world on our own oil and gas.
Yeah, if you count what we have in Alaska and in the Dakotas, as well as Texas and other places, we have enough natural resources, oil and natural gas, in the United States to supply the entire world for right around 50 years. And so there's no reason for us to be importing any of that stuff. This is all something that the globalists have conjured up because they want everybody to be interdependent. In order to have a world government, they have to convince all the countries of the world that they can't be independent. They need to be interdependent because all the countries need all the other countries. So the U.S. needs Saudi Arabia and the Middle East for oil. Well, the fact is we don't. We really don't. And in the first administration of President Trump, he got us to the point where we had just gotten energy independent and we're beginning to export. And then Biden came in and undid everything. And so Trump is trying to get us back to that point, but it's going to take a while. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. But imagine if we didn't have to import any oil and if we could export oil and bring in money for our U.S. government from other countries because they need it already. The Europeans need natural gas. They're desperate for it. We have a lot of it. So anyway, much can be done in this area. And I know things have already been put in motion, but there are certain roadblocks thrown up by the previous administration. And some of your independent oil company drillers, they're a little bit skittish because they're thinking, okay, so what if we put money up to start drilling again and we barely start pumping oil, then another administration comes in and reverses everything again, then we're out of all this money. See, and so Trump needs to be able to put in place something a bit more permanent that won't so easily be undone in the future. And because the problem isn't a lack of oil or natural gas, it's there. It's just getting it out of the ground and helping our economy with it.
Yeah, wow. Gary, you're the guy to ask. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Oh, you're the guy to ask this. You know, I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, they talked about free trade zones all over the world, maybe 10 free trade agreements, areas a la the Club of Rome, that sort of thing. And NAFTA, remember NAFTA, Gary? You're the one to ask. Whatever happened to NAFTA? And has this whole idea of free trade zones just sort of disappeared?
It's still there. You've got various trading blocks around the world, and this was an idea of the Club of Rome, where if you can break the world into 10 different regions that they were proposing, economic regions, then once those countries become completely interdependent and interlocked with each other economically, they reasoned it would be easier to create political unions involving those same countries, breaking down concepts of national sovereignty, and then eventually taking those 10 regions into a system of world government. And so NAFTA was to be one of those regions. But under Trump, that took a back seat. But he does have to be careful. And here's why. The talk about making Canada 51st state. Yeah. If that actually worked, and if Mexico was brought in and Greenland and all of that, you would have basically a regional North America trading bloc, which is exactly what the Club of Rome wants. Now, under Trump, I have no doubt we would remain a sovereign, independent nation. But then what would the next president do? You know, would he use that trading bloc toward a system of world government? So I believe that Trump is just trying to bring the Canadians to the negotiating table to make things more fair. Something I didn't know was that, you know, there was like 100% tariff on our dairy farmers by Canada. I did know that. And there's another product segment that there's like a 300% tariff on that. So there's a lot of room for improvement on that to level the playing field. But I am not in favor of making Canada 51st state. And most Canadians, including Christians up there, they don't want that. And I don't think that's going to happen. Greenland is a bit of a different matter. You only have 40 or 50,000 people living in Greenland, very sparsely populated. And there's an actual movement among the people in Greenland where something like maybe as many as 30% of them would actually favor becoming a territory of the United States, similar to what Puerto Rico is, for example. Why is Greenland important? Strategically, it would be very important militarily between Russia and the United States. And if the U.S. at the very least could have some military bases in Greenland, it would be critical for our national security and defense. Plus, Greenland has a lot of minerals in the ground that the U.S. could really use. And so it could be a win-win situation if the U.S. government came in and said, okay, if you agree to cooperate closely with the U.S., we'll give the citizens of Greenland 5% of whatever minerals we bring out of the ground, whatever their market value is. I'm just throwing that number out there. These people would all be very well off. I mean, almost overnight. Yeah. And so it wouldn't hurt the citizens of Greenland if they did that. It would only help them, and it would help the United States. But I believe that Denmark and the Europeans are going to fight that. But I personally would not be opposed to that. But I am opposed to making Canada a 51st state. Just one more reason for that is Canada has moved further down the socialist path than we have. And if we made them a 51st state, there's a very good chance that their two senators would be leftists. And especially since Ontario province dominates Canada so heavily and it is more liberal, it tends to be more like our New York. And so it could actually sway the balance toward the left by bringing Canada on politically. And I think Trump knows that as well. Not so much to worry about there, but it is an interesting dynamic that's taking place right now.
Oh, great insights. And speaking of borders, you have your article here, Don't Stop Praying. I just really want to recommend that to the listener, GaryKah.org. If Biden, you have the statistic here, if Biden allowed, say, and this is a 15 million illegals in, that's conservative, because you mentioned 12 to 20 million. If even a fraction of those are criminals and or terrorists, that's a couple million people who mean our country and our people harm in one form or another. Why are the liberals protecting these people? Why are these illegals, why are they seen as victims by the liberals? Gary, this makes me scratch my head all the time. How do they not get this?
Well, in a lot of states, all you need is a driver's license to be able to vote. And that has become more, well, in California, it kind of started there and is spreading around the country. And so I believe that the Dems and those to the far left see all these illegals coming in, believing that 80-90% of them are going to vote Democrat. Not just Democrat, but socialist, leftist Democrat. And so if there is a true socialist globalist agenda to take the U.S. down and to weaken us so that we can be forced into a new world order, this is exactly what one would do. And I really believe that's what's happening here. And like you said, given that we've got for sure between 12 and 20 million illegals that have come in, could be more than that, but somewhere in between there is what most sources would agree on. And some of the surveys that were taken of like on a given day of who was coming across, 5 to 10% of them had criminal records. So if you apply that 5 to 10% to the 12 to 20 million illegals, it means we have somewhere between 600,000 and 2 million very bad people who have infiltrated our country and under the cover of this mass migration. And it was totally open borders. I mean, it was deliberate. Because, look, Trump stopped it in a matter of weeks after coming into office. And the Biden administration kept saying they're doing everything they can. Well, that's just not true. And we all know that.
Right.
This was an agenda, very successful from their standpoint, to be able to get this many people into the country. And now they're using judges to litigate every last person we try to get out of here, even if they're criminals, even if they don't have rights as U.S. citizens. And so they're putting criminals ahead of U.S. citizens and our protections, because if you don't get these people out of here and get them out of here quickly, how many more murders, rapes, violent crimes are going to be committed against U.S. citizens just in the next year? It's going to be in the tens of thousands. You can count on that, given these statistics.
Wow. Yeah.
It is frustrating.
It is very frustrating. They don't care about the American people. They only care about the vote, the politics, blue city mayors, corrupt judges, blue states, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. You say there are so few Republican mayors and even governors at this point. I guess I was surprised there's only a handful of Republican mayors in the whole country.
Yeah, there are of big cities. You've got Miami, which is quite a success story. The mayor there has brought homicide rates down to like a fourth of what they were just a few years ago. There are some success stories out there and some Republican mayors, but for the most part, I would say, and this, I'm pulling this out of thin air, but I don't believe it would be inaccurate. I'd say between 85 and 90% of the mayors of the 50 largest cities in the United States are Democrats. So that has become an enclave for immorality, liberalness, far left socialism. It's the big cities. Mm-hmm. And the problem is some of these big cities dominate their states. You know, in Chicago, you've got like 6 million people, over half the population of the state of Illinois, all around the Chicago area. In Arizona, Phoenix is roughly half the population of that state, Atlanta in Georgia. And so socialists have come to realize if they can dominate these big cities and own about 70% of the population there to get them to vote a certain way, the rest of the state, they're almost helpless politically, you know, because it's difficult to overcome that type of a margin. And our son, until recently, lived in Illinois. And a lot of the state of Illinois is quite conservative. It's a lot like Indiana, you know, where we live. But because Chicago has so much influence and say because of the numbers, consistently, the ultra liberals, far leftists get in. And I mean, it's a crime what's going on in Chicago. It's a very bad, sad joke, really, the leadership that they have had. And it's not going to change unless the people of Chicago wake up. But they have so many Marxist and socialist activists living there now that it's just, you know, an example of what's going on in other parts of the country, too. So to make a point out of all this, we need to pray that the new administration would be able to move quickly to protect us from all these criminals that have entered the country. Mm-hmm. And this is a huge job for people like Kristi Noem of Homeland Security, Tom Homan of ICE. We need to pray for Pam Bondi, our U.S. Attorney General, because she's trying to do the right thing, legally speaking. But again, she's got a lot of corrupt judges to deal with. And so they're trying to take authority over this situation. And she's saying, no, you don't have this authority. This is a national security issue that belongs to the executive branch of government. And then also in a broader sense for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, they're throwing everything they have at him.
They are.
And these are the people that we really need to be praying for right now and lifting up, because I think they're trying to do the right thing, but every move they make is being litigated and being challenged. Again, because the left wants to keep the criminals in the country. They have no interest in getting them out of here. So we've got all these people traveling to El Salvador, which I've got to say something here to get off track, but it's worth it. Late August, September, I was invited to Costa Rica to be a keynote speaker at a meeting of evangelical pastors who were concerned about the overall direction of things in parts of Central America. So this was also a prayer meeting. And what I didn't know when I accepted the invitation was that along with these 150 to 200 pastors who would be there, various Christian members of parliaments from Central America would also be at this meeting. And so I had the opportunity of talking with a member of the parliament from El Salvador, and also his personal pastor. And these people, the two of them, also have the ear of the president of El Salvador, the very person that President Trump has been dealing with in the last few weeks. And get this, this was arguably the most criminal country in the world with their gangs. Since he stepped in as president, half of them fled to the United States because they took him seriously. They knew he was going to crack down on crime. The other half stayed there thinking he'll never be able to do this. He rounded them all up in a matter of months. And as of last September, when I met with this member of the parliament who was a Christian and his pastor, they told me that the entire country of El Salvador, which has over 5 million people, I think maybe 6 or 7 million living there, they had not had one murder, not one homicide in 460 days.
Wow.
Indianapolis, where we live, had something like 200 homicides last year, and we have about 1 million people. This is a country of over 5 million that had the worst crime on the planet. And because of what one person was able to do by the grace of God, they didn't have one homicide in 460 days. I actually didn't believe them. I thought I had misunderstood them. So I got them to repeat it 3 times different ways and saying, you mean like a year and a third? You haven't had one homicide in the entire country. And they said, that's correct. They said ladies with small babies, if they couldn't sleep at night, were walking in downtown San Salvador at 10, 11 o'clock at night without fear, where just a couple of years ago, you would have never even thought of doing something like that. And so this can be done, is what I'm saying. And we have a president in El Salvador who's done it. And I believe President Trump is trying to follow his example. He'll never be able to get away with what he was able to do in El Salvador because of our judicial system here, and all the litigation. But it can be done. And so we need to pray that God, again, would root out corrupt judges, expose them for what they are, and that he would help President Trump and the several people on his cabinet that I just named to be victorious in this area, that they would be able to get the criminals out of our country. And if we have to, into El Salvador, because they will be happy to keep them there in that jail where they cannot harm U.S. citizens or anybody else.
Wow, that's fascinating because we don't walk the streets of our own towns anymore. And we were talking about Indiana and Illinois. Wisconsin understands completely being a purple state. They voted for Trump. But when it comes to getting the right judges in during these midterms and all such, we haven't been able to do that because Madison and Milwaukee run the show. There's something about those two cities, which is exactly what you were talking about, and we totally get that here. I want to talk a little bit about our military too, Gary, because last week, Tim and I on the show here talked about the rare earth elements the U.S. needs to build the latest technologically advanced weaponry. China holds a lot of the cards on that, and you tell us in this article, quote, China currently has the capability of constructing 10 new naval vessels for every one ship built by the U.S. Many of our fighter jets can't fly because of missing parts or other issues. Our military, Gary, did not receive any attention, I don't believe, under Obama and Biden, by design, of course. But now there's things that need to be done. Like you said, Pete Hegseth is under the gun constantly. That poor guy, he took on this job, and it's constant war against him and what Trump is trying to do. What's the state of our military, and is Trump going to be able to reinforce what we need for these last times?
Yeah, we are still at this moment very vulnerable. Okay. It's going to take a couple of years to get our military back in shape again because it's become so run down. And China knows that. We do have an advantage still, a slim advantage in the area of nuclear submarines that are stationed all around the world. But if it wouldn't be for that, I think they'd be very tempted to attack us and take us down. But they don't have to. They work through proxies, just like Iran does, And so when you've got all these terrorist groups around the world, all they need is funding. They've penetrated the United States, no question in my mind about that. And it's only by the grace of God that we have not had a major terror event within the United States yet. And so we have to pray that our intelligence people, the good ones, would be on top of it, our Secret Service, that they'd be protecting President Trump and these other individuals on his cabinet, because they all have a target on their backs, because they are trying to defend our national sovereignty and keep us a free nation. But one of the things that concerns me, and I believe this is what keeps our top military generals awake at night, they're very concerned about the possibility of either an all-out cyber attack or even worse, an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. And if you have a nuclear bomb go off miles up in the atmosphere, say over Omaha or Kansas City, depending on the strength of it, it could potentially knock out anything with an electronic component in it throughout almost the entire country. It would literally shut us down. Yeah. And one general, I quoted him a few years ago in one of my articles, said that in his view, close to 90% of the population of the United States would die within 1 year if there was an all-out EMP strike on the U.S., because the food supply would practically be shut down. Trucks wouldn't run anymore. Gas pumps wouldn't run. You couldn't withdraw money from the bank. It would be a nightmare. And so President Trump became aware of this toward the end of his first term. And he began to take steps, measures to secure our power grid from an EMP strike. Guess what Biden did almost as soon as he got into office? He nixed all of that. He stopped it dead in its tracks and refused to do anything more to protect our grid. So we need to pray that President Trump would be able to move forward quickly on that front to protect our electrical grid and pick up where he left off. And I mean, it's got to happen fast, though. I'd say in the next 6 months to a year. And so I'm sure he has somebody on that, but it takes a while, to do that. But it can be done. We have the technology to protect our grid, and so much to pray into. But there are demonic forces out there that want to take our country down. It is ultimately a spiritual battle, and so we need to combat it through prayer, strategic prayer. And then also doing something ourselves, informing people, speaking out, putting pressure on our elected officials, rather than just sitting back and being pushovers. Here in the state of Indiana, we just got an excellent lieutenant governor in, solid Bible-believing Christian. In fact, he was a pastor. We had the opportunity of meeting him recently, and his in-laws go to our church. We know them well. In fact, they receive our publication. So this is a victory to have a solid lieutenant governor in, just in case our governor were to go rogue. Right. He'll hold it accountable. And right now, our governor, for the most part, is doing a good job. We have a new governor, Braun. He was our U.S. senator, and he's much more conservative than the previous governor that we had. And so I believe if we had another COVID round like we did the first time, I think Indiana would remain relatively free, that there would not be a forced shutdown of everything. And so right now, the governors play an important role. Yes. And about half of the governors in the country are Republican. It's almost equally divided on that front. But some of them are rhino governors.
That's right.
But 10 to 15 of them, I think, are legitimate conservative governors. And so we have been able to make some progress through the most recent election on that front. Wow. So thank the Lord for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I know we're talking about a lot of political things here today. And that's why it's so important to and I know you see this, you see the underlying spiritual battle that this really is all about. And so that's why prayer is so important, and discernment. And so many Christians until recently, and even still now, they've just bought into so many lies because they haven't done the research. They haven't been praying for discernment. They haven't been reading their Bibles. And so even on the whole Palestinian thing, we haven't even gotten into that. Yeah. But to see people out there marching in favor of Hamas and doing so, sometimes even invoking the name of Christ, supporting a terrorist organization, not realizing what's at the roots of all this. And then also in our country, they've fallen for socialist ideas economically in the name of compassion. Right. They believe they're being compassionate for the poor. And there's a place for that. But that doesn't mean you help criminals come into the country because somehow you feel sorry for them. You know, the whole thing going on with this El Salvadorian right now, and members of Congress going down there trying to bring him back into the United States.
Yeah.
You know, if he was completely innocent, it would be a different matter. But
Right.
everything points to the fact that this is not a good guy. And they're trying to make a spectacle of the whole thing just so they can then try to litigate all the others as well.
Gary, we are out of time, and it is such a blessing to talk to you. You're so knowledgeable on so many different things and encouraging the church to pray over all these things. I'm so grateful for that. We got to pray for Israel and Gaza. We got to pray for Ukraine. We got to pray AI, and we didn't get to that either. So thank you so much for joining me today. We have Jeff Kinley, Headlines Tomorrow, Jeff Kinley on Thursday, Todd Hampson on Friday, a full week. So much to talk about with some new guests. So I hope you'll stay with me the rest of the week. Have a wonderful day in Jesus.